Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
You can listen to the radio, or you can be on the radio if you would like to join us. 0491 65 68 60. If you'd like to leave on the telephone. Maybe you'd like to talk to my guest, the Honourable Sarah Game, MLC. Welcome to the table.
Thanks so much.
Nice of you to come by.
Very nice of you to invite me.
I like the way some of my guests look around and they've got this kind of mused cross between shock and astonishment. A radio station on a dining room table is unusual.
It is. It's a beautiful, but you have a lovely street and a beautiful home, and it's a beautiful room. And I met a beautiful dog. I don't know if that was yours.
Oh no, that belongs to Pete, and it is a very special dog. It's a cattle dog. Sheepdog. Sheepdog. No.
Border collie.
Border collie.
She looked at border collie. Oh, she's yours, Pete, right?
Yeah, she rounds up everything.
Yes, she was rounding me up.
Yeah, children, birds, anything.
Yes.
Oh, no, not birds. Oh, dear. I was listening to Pauline Hanson in Canberra the other day, and I've got enormous respect for her. I've known her for years and years and years. And I thought to myself, she must have the patience of Job. She kept on asking the same basic question. And these people either don't know the answer, won't own up to the answer, or just amuse themselves by giving people the runaround. And somehow the parliamentary system we have allows that sort of prevarication.
You're right. I mean, for me, I used to work as a veterinarian, so I wasn't so familiar with the inner workings of Parliament until I took this job about 18 months ago. And I misguidedly thought suddenly that I would have access to all these really important people who knew all these really important things, and I'd be able to get to the bottom of some really important matters.
Good luck with that.
But it's just a lot harder than that. To find out what you really want. So you're absolutely right.
Take me back to when you say I was offered this job. You see, I've got this romantic idea in my mind that a politician isn't offered the job. I mean, it's something that is within you and drives you, and it's a calling.
No, but I think that's important to get to the bottom of. No, I think my calling was make a difference, make a contribution. So that's been my calling, and that's why I've worked as a veterinarian with all sorts of animals. That's why I took a job in teaching, and I specifically worked, I lived overseas for 12 years, and I worked with kids that were from really socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds, and, worked with the RSPCA and things like that, because I always wanted to make a difference and make a contribution, but I had never been politically driven. I certainly am now. So this was really, people say to me, oh, well done, congratulations. And I obviously never take credit for that because it was the party that got in this state. But that said, I'm very proud of the fact that when we got in 18 months ago, and I'm relying on my mother's facts here, but I believe she said the highest we'd ever had in this state of a primary vote was 3%. And recent polls show the primary vote in this state at 11%. Yeah. So I do take credit for the fact that I think it's gone extremely well over the last 18 months. But what it was an opportunity. And I'm lucky for that. But I guess I'm hoping to show people that I'm someone that will seize an opportunity, be grateful for the opportunity, and work hard every day for the people of South Australia to sort of earn my keep. That said, as you said, that's actually quite hard because you think you're going to get to the bottom of a whole lot of things for them and make change. And that's actually quite challenging to do.
No, absolutely. One Nation, what attracted you to One Nation?
Well, I've become more and more attracted to One Nation since I did it. Obviously, my mother was involved with it. And I think it's the same thing that attracts other people to One Nation. I think people like Pauline, the fact that she's actually a hardworking, resilient person she is as she seems, and the willingness to be brave. That said, I don't know that I felt that brave when I first took the job. I'd always been a really private person, and the idea, I have way more respect for Pauline now Because it's difficult being brave in the public arena, but you feel, I think, a sense of responsibility once you're there. People are doing it really tough. I mean, people say to me, wow, it must have been hard for you the last 18 months. And I always think, well, any politician really that complains, I think, isn't got a good perspective on what it's like for people because, we are paid well, we have secure employment. And for that, I'm very grateful. So it's not difficult. The only thing that's difficult about it is feeling that you're doing it justice. And so I guess it's a long way of answering that question to say that propels me to be brave because I don't want to sit here and be a lemon, who doesn't earn my keep for the next period of time.
Yeah.
And to be effective at all, you've got to be brave.
I don't know what drives it. My idealistic sense is that, common sense would drive politics. If somebody came up with a really good idea and just happened to be sitting on the opposite side of the house, I would say, well, gee, that's a great idea. Why don't we do that? Oh, no, you can't do that. No, and there are factions and there are all sorts of things going on. There are plots and subplots.
I don't think anything goes by merit. I mean, that was an interesting learning lesson for me because in the veterinary world, it's all about collaboration. And someone might have a better idea than you. Someone knows better how to treat that. You're seeking help and assistance. You work together and you're trying to do the right thing. It was very naive of me, but I expected as well when I ended up in this privileged position that if I had an idea or a good idea, that people would be interested in that. But that's just not how it works. It only works if they need you. If they need you, they'll listen to you, otherwise they won't. And so that's been good for me because
I need you, you mean
we need your vote, you're relevant to us,
yes,
we can't get this through. Otherwise your perspective on that bill is
they come
irrelevant.
They come around courting, do they?
I think if they need your vote to get legislation through, then your opinion on that legislation will matter. And if you've got improvements that you want to make on that, it will matter. If they've already lined that up and they've already got enough people to get that legislation through, you can have a good idea. I don't think anyone's interested in that because it's all about the numbers. That said, because that's been my position for a lot of the time, I've managed to get a little bit of influence by just simply creating media. You've got to get the community behind you then, so it's a lot harder work. But I think if you can get the community behind you about a particular idea, if you can get on the media, it has a role to play in that, and you can start creating public pressure on a particular issue, which is difficult, because I'm one person with 2 staff. But if you can generate all that, then you might be able to have a little bit of sway. But I don't think it's based simply on coming to the table, listening to people's ideas and, acting on merit, which was a shock to me. Probably not a shock to others, but I've learnt that first couple of weeks in. So I've been going with that for most of the time.
But you have to sit there and be, they might try to persuade you. I won't say seduce you, but they'll try and persuade you. And you have to be strong if you don't actually believe in what these guys are putting on the table.
Yeah. I don't find that hard because for me, you've got to act with integrity in what you really believe in. And I think I don't find that bit difficult. More difficult for me is, I've got 3 children, 8, 7 and 5, and I don't want them embarrassed of anything that I do. And so for me, I just want to feel good about what I do. And I want them to feel good about what I do. So I'm not easily pressured. I don't find that difficult.
How do you juggle the 3 children and the very demanding job and the hours, of course, that you are asked to work?
Well, exactly. And I don't like to complain because I know that other people are doing it really tough.
Complain, come on.
Well, I think we're very privileged, but it is difficult because our 3 primary school age children, there are a lot of times where you're really passionate about a particular issue or the community is really passionate about a particular issue and you might get an opportunity to speak on radio or do something, but it's right at school drop-off, in the morning.
You're a single mum.
Yeah. Their dad does help out some nights, but I have them the majority of the time. And so on those days, which is most of the days, I just can't take that radio opportunity or that television opportunity that might happen.
No.
And then you feel bad for the community, really, because you're meant to be out there advocating. But I do my best. And usually it works, but when it doesn't work, it's a disaster.
That's Katie, the border collie, who's saying, that vet you've got in there is a lot prettier than the one I have. I'm going to come in and talk to her. Dear, oh dear. Yeah. Is there a big picture ambition that you have for the party or the state or the country?
Yes, I mean, there's lots of things. I mean, I guess particularly recently, it's been sad to see the division that's happened with, the voice referendum, and now we're going to have the voice legislation here in this state.
How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I voted against that. So we've got legislation already, and I came out and voted against that and made that clear really early on. And the Liberals voted against it too, sort of much later on. But there's nothing really we can do about that right now. I mean, they've got the numbers to keep that legislation going. I actually introduced a bill recently to repeal the state voice.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call it to a vote at the moment because we simply don't have the numbers. So, but I think that kind of, when you say what's the vision is for more unity. I guess it's also about a greater priority on families and keeping families together. And on that note, something that I've been doing really because I discovered that there was a need in that area is doing some advocacy for men and men's health because, and I don't know if you're aware of that, but we've got this idea, I think, in society that men just have it really good, and therefore we've got the Minister for Women, we've got an office for women, they've got their own Premier's Council that help with all policy decisions to give greater equity, for women. And really, men just have it really good. Yet when you look at the facts, men, in my opinion, they don't have it that great. I mean, they die earlier than women. They have less years of healthy life than women. They take their life more often than women.
You can be sexist as long as you are denigrating men. You can be racist as long as you are denigrating white people. I mean, the thing is very strangely set up. But going back to the thing about this voice,
yes,
locally legislated
yes,
voice, Gary, who listens to our program, sent me this, which I've mentioned before. He's drawing my attention to the Constitution, which says a state voice is invalid. Section 109 of the Australian Constitution says that when a law of a state is inconsistent with the law of the Commonwealth, the latter shall prevail and the former shall be, to the extent of the inconsistency, invalid. Now, the voice has been kicked out. I mean, there's no way in the world that you can have a state version of what the Commonwealth has already rejected.
Well, and was it Gary, was it? Well, I would suggest Gary, I mean, if he's in South Australia, I would suggest that he should write to the Premier about this. That's been drawn to my attention before. I mean, people are really upset. I mean, firstly, some people aren't aware that we've got our own voice here. The first they became aware of it was at the referendum. And then obviously they believed that we'd voted against that, and that was that. And really, people are just discovering now, oh no, hang on, back in March, the Labor government put through our own state-based voice, and that's carrying on, and we're going ahead with elections next year.
Did the Liberals vote for that or vote against it?
They voted against it, but their reasoning was a little bit different than mine. I mean, they came out and said, they didn't have the detail to understand that at the end, but it was a little bit different than mine, and I think they were a little bit more conflicted. For us, I mean, Pauline came out, straight away and said, no, we're going to be against this. I had to look into it. I read a really great book called The Burden of Culture by Gary Johns, who had been a Labor
Yes, he
minister.
had, yes.
And I would say anyone who's conflicted about how they should feel about either the referendum or the state-based voice should read The Burden of Culture. I think it's called The Burden of Culture, Dismantling the Aboriginal Industry and Giving Hope to Its Victims. And it was one of the best books I'd ever read. And it made me really confident that the right thing to do by everyone, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, was to vote against this. And in fact, I'm the only person in Parliament who has voted against all what I would call race-based legislation, because we've had other pieces of legislation go through as well, particularly relating to the court systems and so on, that just relate to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I think, these days, firstly, we've got to acknowledge a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are doing as well as other non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Exactly. There's only about 1.3% of people who would be represented by this gap and the deprivation and problems. So it's not a really big problem.
Well, the thing is, there's lots of people who are not Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander who are in poverty and who are homeless.
Absolutely.
And so I have advocated from the beginning that we need to move towards support based on need, not based on ancestry or race or anything else. And that avoids that scrutiny that people, I think, rightly say, well, hang on a second, you don't look Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, you're entitled to these things that we're not and we're struggling too. And then you go down that track that we don't want to go down, really, of saying, well, how do you prove it? Prove it, which is, I think, uncomfortable for everybody. But when you're giving one level of support to one group of people, then I can understand that question becomes, pertinent to ask. So the whole way the debate's been really awful. I mean, I've been accused of really, being happy with the status quo and being sort of racist and all the rest of it, really just by a few select people within the parliament. And it's completely wrong. It's actually about treating everybody equally.
Yeah.
And dealing with our situation that people are in poverty and disadvantage in this state, and they are of all different backgrounds.
Yep. I would love to see Peter Malinauskas take his state-based voice to the next election and see what the people would say about that.
Yes. Well, exactly. I think it's one of the most unpopular things that they've done. So, as I say, I've introduced this repeal bill, which I think I did within the last couple of weeks, which would effectively completely remove it. But the Liberals have been open to supporting that. But unfortunately, with the way the numbers are at the moment, even if the Liberals voted with me, we wouldn't get that through. So the thing to understand with that, because people say, well, what's the harm, Sarah? What's the harm in doing this voice? Well, the harm is, we don't have unlimited resources.
No, and what's the good? You don't do things because it's not going to harm. You do things because they're going to make things better.
Yes.
And how you're going to make Aboriginal people better is to make sure that they get the money that is given and it doesn't get soaked up by the Aboriginal industry, which lives really high on the hog.
We don't need, this state-based voice is going to consist of over 100 people that somehow then need to comment on pieces of legislation that go through. I can't see how that's the priority at all. I mean, what we need is families to stay together, kids to go to school, people to get jobs and skills and gain employment and contribute to society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it was Warren Mundine. He said that you would fix the gap problem almost in one generation, just as long as you got the kids to school and you stopped the alcohol.
Yeah.
And that doesn't cost an awful lot of money.
Well, it's about early intervention, and it's about, so people say, well, we've tried everything, Sarah, so why not let us try the voice? Well, we haven't tried everything. We need to put our focus on keeping families together and having these early intervention strategies, and that's for all families, regardless of background.
Yeah, and then along comes somebody with the cashless credit card, which always seemed to me to be a very good idea, and that was making sure that the money was being spent on food and not grog. And the Labor Party won't have a bar of that. Why? Discriminatory? Well, I think the system at the moment is discriminatory, isn't it?
I think that a lot of support for these types of legislation and the voice and so on are coming from people who are not aware just how tough the ordinary Australian is finding it.
Sure. No, I agree with that. The other thing that annoys me is this business of politicians who have three flags behind them. We have one nation, one flag, one rule of law, and one country. And the idea of sort of separating on the basis of race various groups and everyone is entitled to a flag?
Yes. Well, I've only got one flag.
God bless you.
Yeah, so I've got one flag. But I completely agree, and there's a lot to feel, proud about being Australian. I think one thing that's drawn to my attention often is the school system and some of the community events I've had where people have come along. They're really upset about the way their children are being made to feel so guilty, for, I guess, wrongs of the past. Like the kids are genuinely distressed about it. And I think, we need to teach an accurate history, but good and bad. I mean, a lot has been attempted to rectify the situation, and a lot of good has been done, or certainly tried to be done.
Listening to Pauline the other day, she was on about getting some simple answers about this bill that is looking at establishing carbon sinks. And, she asked this very simple question. Could you tell me of one country where a carbon sink arrangement is in existence? And couldn't answer the question. Couldn't answer the question. And she asked, what is this obsession with carbon? Carbon is absolutely vital. Carbon dioxide is essential to life. Carbon dioxide accounts for, I think she said it was 4% of the atmosphere. And the other side, the Labor Party, you could hear she was very cleverly manoeuvring them into a situation where she was describing with the perspective of this thing that we are devoting so much attention and time and money and climate change. It's a clarion call. Everybody talks about it, but when you start to think about carbon dioxide, 4% of the atmosphere, what is the deal? What is the problem they're trying to fix?
Well, especially, regardless of which side you're on there, really, with climate change, it makes no sense to have, one rule or one approach going on in Australia, but quite happy,
Yeah. It's almost like the coal that we pass off to China and India is being burnt in some other atmosphere.
Exactly.
So they get the benefit. Admittedly, we get the money, I suppose.
Yes.
But we're not allowed to have the cheap electricity that such resources would provide us with.
Exactly. It just makes no sense, regardless
of which side you sit on. But why don't we all stand up? Why don't we all stand up and say, the emperor doesn't have any clothes on?
Yes, well, you're ridiculed, I guess, and you're not allowed to say these things. But I think that's growing. I think people are becoming, continually dissatisfied. I mean, it's been interesting to see, in this state now, and we wouldn't have believed it before, but, the federal polls show, by 1%, but we've actually got slightly more popularity in this state now for One Nation than we do the Greens. And I think that needs to be celebrated.
Yes. What do you think of the Greens, by the way?
Well,
they're way left of the Labor Party, aren't they?
Look, the two members that we have in South Australia, to be fair, we have on a personal level, and I don't know whether it's going to continue or not, but we have gotten on and had, a reasonable relationship. But that said, recently, and I don't know if you're aware, but one of the members got up and gave a speech about One Nation in Parliament and about, basically it being a sort of racist hate group. And I really so the tide may be turning in our ability to have...
You strike me as being a common sense group. Sorry.
Well, yes, and I just so I'm not sure when we say how do we find the Greens, I'm not sure what the relationship is going to hold going forward, because if they carry on like that, I don't think that we're going to be able to have a very amicable relationship.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. The Honourable Sarah Game, MLC, is my special guest. What do you think of this little story? A pristine lizard rock bushland with ancient indigenous art faces being bulldozed so that 450 risky homes to be built by the local Aboriginal Land Council can be constructed. So how would you, ancient indigenous art, you'd have thought it would be a sacred site, wouldn't you?
You would.
But the Aboriginal Land Council is quite happy to bulldoze the whole bloody thing to build what is described here as 450 risky homes. The Aboriginal Land Council wants to build 450 homes on bushland. Locals oppose it, but fear they'll be branded racist if they speak out. See, these people are bullies, aren't they?
Well, I think the important point that's coming to my mind when you read that out is simply how difficult it's going to be once we get our state-based voice of over 100 people and how they're all going to come together and take a singular position.
Well, they might take a singular position, but with sort of the Aboriginal world being basically 400 different tribes, sometimes very different languages as well, they really do disagree with each other. In fact, I think it is in Aboriginal law that not one particular group or mob or tribe is allowed to speak for another. So you've got a recipe for argument.
Well, exactly, because this state-based voice will be allowed to come and make representations to Parliament, although they don't have to, which I always found interesting because we're establishing this big bureaucratic arm, really, and that arm can be asked to come to Parliament and they can be asked to make reports, but they're under no obligation to. But were they to choose to come to Parliament and make a representation, it would only be a single person. And so I think that will be very interesting to see how everybody will come together on a particular matter.
I can't see it happening.
To agree with that one individual that will make that representation on behalf of everybody.
No, well, you're very good at this. I predict you've got a brilliant future. What do you want to do?
It's the same. Look, it's right back to that beginning of our conversation. I just want to make a difference and make a good contribution. I mean, some areas that I've taken an interest in, I guess, are not, typical for One Nation. I mean, I've done a lot of work with children and children's groups, and one of the areas that I am passionate about at the moment, because I've gotten to know Chris McDermott, although I'm not a sports fan, I don't know anything about any sport, I'm afraid to say, as an Australian. So I met Chris McDermott at a charity for children's mental health, and he had started this little Heroes Foundation, which is for seriously ill children and their families with unmet needs. And one of the areas that he is focused on at the moment is children with childhood dementia, which I hadn't heard of, and I think a lot of people haven't heard of. But childhood dementia affects over 2,000 children in Australia, and I think 90 children die every year of it. It's always terminal. And there are cases of children, in their teenagehood who've been totally normal, happy, healthy children who then start to deteriorate and they stop being able to talk, walk or play until their body completely shuts down. And so when you ask, well, what do you want to do? I'm looking for every opportunity where I can negotiate or navigate an improvement in areas that I care about. And I would say, children and vulnerable children and families is an area that I hope to, watch this space, and I'll come back and be able to report that we've been able to make some improvement.
You need other members of your party to get into office, because you would be carrying the entire thing. I mean, you'd have to be either an expert or across so many different portfolios and subjects. You stand up there representing One Nation. Yes.
I feel that because although I would say I think the public have been really receptive to me, I wasn't a known person before I got in, and I think it would have been really fair to be quite harsh. I thought I'd have at least 18 months to 2 years of trying to prove myself, and I'm sort of surprised that the public have been so behind me and sort of realised, well, hang on, she's really trying. And I think that says something. I think people don't need you to be perfect, but they do need to feel that you care and that you're trying really hard. That said, people aren't always happy and satisfied that you're across everything or doing everything you can. And I would just say to them, well, we need to get more people in at the next election, because that's the way that we're going to make more change and have more weight in the chamber and get more done.
Yep. Well, there are several things that you can do, sort of thinking outside the box. You think inflation is this evil that is driving everyone to distraction because his or her mortgage is now more expensive, blah, 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 blah. So we've got to slay this demon of inflation. The simplest thing in the world, and I put this to politicians, and I get this kind of weird look, you simply make inflation tax deductible. I even had a journalist say to me, what does tax deductible mean? I thought, what? For God's sake. No, the idea being that if you've got money in the bank or money
Yes.
in your pocket, it is demonstrably worth less at the end of the year, say 5%. You immediately take 5% off your taxable income and you watch the federal government fix inflation almost overnight.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. No one's ever suggested that to me before, but I agree. I think you would see that become a real priority.
It should be. It should be my right.
Yes.
It should be my right to deduct what the government and its policies have taken out of my pocket.
Yes, I completely agree. As well as, I've been really surprised coming back here to see how expensive energy prices are. I mean, when I came
unnecessarily
so. I came back. I lived in the United Kingdom for 12 years. And
don't forget the war in Ukraine, though. They trot that out every time they talk about electricity costs.
Yes, it's not our renewable energy focus, but we need to do something about our electricity costs here. I mean, I lived overseas for 12 years, came back, saw my father, who unfortunately passed away in February, and he was getting really upset that I'd leave a light on. We never thought about that.
Oh, yeah, you've got to think about it. You've
got to think about that here.
Yes.
One light at a time.
We cannot be the energy-rich country that we are.
Yes.
Abundant gas and abundant coal.
Yes.
And, of course, uranium. And there's another thing politicians should be talking about. We should have nuclear power.
Absolutely. I mean, other countries are increasing globally their nuclear power generating capacity, and nuclear energy and those small modular nuclear reactors have come a long way. I mean, I remember I've been to a few conferences on nuclear energy, and I had an expert come over from America, and I said to her, well, explain to me about safety, because this seems to be, people still have this concept about safety. And she said that these small modular nuclear reactors are so safe that you could fly, a commercial jet plane into them, and they would be totally self-contained.
Yes.
They are completely safe.
The world has moved on, but people's thinking about nuclear power has not moved on. And most people you talk to about nuclear power have got no idea that at Lucas Heights, which is a suburb, southern suburb of Sydney, there is a nuclear reactor, and it has been there for nearly 60 years.
Yes, exactly. And we're going to be having, nuclear submarines, and absolutely, we need to be investing in this now. I think also, there's a misconception about how long it's going to take. I mean, we do need to make legislative changes federally to even allow any progress to happen at all. But, my understanding is a lot of these smaller nuclear reactors, once you get them going, within a few years, you can have them up and assembled now. Yep. So there is that initial long lead time, but that's no excuse for not getting started now.
Yep. And the other thing, speaking of nuclear power, up and down North Terrace, they tell me they're in basements and lift wells and stairwells and things, there are drums of low-level medical nuclear waste. And you'd be across the Kimber thing.
Yes.
$100 million we spent on the Kimber adventure, and we had inquiries and we had agreement.
Yes.
And then we had the decision. It will be there.
Yes.
Then the Aboriginals put their hand up and said, no, it won't. And this stupid government in Canberra says, oh, okay, that's all right. You've decided, fine.
Yes.
Now, they would have been consulted along the way, and yet suddenly they've got the right of veto over something as important as that.
Well, I mean, there was word that they hadn't been consulted properly. I'm not, I don't know, the details of all that consultation process, but either way, it's a completely botched job to spend taxpayer money
$100 million
like that for no outcome.
Yes, no. And we're back at square one.
Completely unacceptable. And you can understand why people who, have nowhere to live, sleeping in their cars, can't afford to eat, have just had it with government and their politicians.
No, I totally agree. And they reckon that the nuclear waste is safer in North Terrace in the city of Adelaide in the square mile than it would be at Maralinga or at wherever they put it. Yeah. Now, I've enjoyed talking with you. You've got, I think, a very, very good, wonderful career in front of you if you want it. Something I'd like to talk to you about at another day.
Yes.
I don't seem to have any luck getting through to politicians with the idea of having a good look at charities.
Okay.
Now, if you look at television, there seems to me to be a flurry of all kinds of lotteries. You know, and it can be to help the RSPCA, it can be to help the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne, it can be to help the Children's Hospital here, and they all have a similarity which kind of leads me to think that there is one person or one organisation behind. What they don't do, and they're not breaking the law, unfortunately doesn't insist that when you're collecting money for charity, that you declare how much of every dollar that is collected goes to the cause.
Right. Well, I think that's absolutely necessary.
Well, it should be.
Front page of the charity.
Well, yes, it should be.
This is how much of your dollar goes towards
Absolutely.
the cause.
We were enormously proud when I was more involved with the Variety Club here in South Australia. We were enormously proud of the fact that 95 cents in every dollar.
Yes.
It was written into our constitution. We couldn't spend more than 5 cents in the dollar on administration.
Yes.
Now, if you Google it and go into it a bit, you will discover that there is no law that says that a single cent has to be given to the cause.
Yes.
Not one single cent. When I brought this up with the Treasurer a few years back, he kind of looked at me and he said, "It's an empty church, Jeremy." Well, I don't think it is. The charitable dollar, the raising of money, is huge business in Australia.
Yes.
$200 billion a year. And I would suggest that not a lot of that money ever gets to the cause for which it was collected. And again, I say, and even the really big charities, they are not breaking the law. The law just doesn't insist upon that transparency. And it bloody well should.
I absolutely agree. And I will note down to look into that because absolutely. And they've actually shown that the most generous people and the people that give the most are actually those that have the least. And so I guess when we're having this conversation, it really upsets me to think that there are people who are doing it tough and struggling, who have that empathy for others and want to give to charity, and that money's not going where they think it is.
Well, perhaps we can talk some more about that, Sarah. Lovely to see you, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
From the One Nation Party, Sarah Game, ladies and gentlemen.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.